We all know the big stories of World War II, the epic battles, the famous leaders, the sheer scale of the conflict. But beneath those well-known events lies a hidden history, a collection of bizarre accidents, improbable acts of courage, and strange twists of fate that shaped the war in ways most people never learn about. Today, we're diving deep into 10 of these incredible, lesser-known truths that prove just how unpredictable the world's deadliest conflict really was. Let's start in the final, desperate days of the war in Europe. The fate of Paris, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, hung by a single thread. Hitler had issued a chilling order. If the Allies got too close, the city was to be leveled. Every bridge, every monument, every historic landmark, all of it was to be turned to dust. The man tasked with this destruction was the German commander in charge, General Dietrich von Choltitz. But as he stood there, looking out over centuries of art, history, and culture, he couldn't do it. He stalled. He ignored frantic calls from Berlin. He secretly negotiated with the French resistance. This one man's quiet act of defiance, his refusal to obey one of history's most feared dictators, is the sole reason the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, and the heart of Paris still stand today. His personal decision saved a civilization's heritage from total annihilation. While Paris was being saved by an act of conscience, an unbelievable story of survival was unfolding thousands of miles away. It was 1942, over the jungles of Burma. A Japanese lieutenant named Hiroshi Sato was on a bombing mission when his plane was shot down. The aircraft disintegrated around him at nearly 10,000 feet, sending him plummeting toward the earth without a parachute. Logic dictates that his story should have ended right there. But fate had other plans. He crashed into a massive, dense tangle of tropical trees, whose thick branches broke his fall just enough to cushion the impact. He was horrifically injured and barely conscious, but he was alive. It took him days to crawl out of the jungle, but he did. His survival is still considered one of the war's most incredible and statistically impossible miracles. Back in Britain, the pressure of the war was driving scientists to explore some truly radical ideas. One of them was so strange it sounds like something out of a spy novel: bombs filled with poisoned feathers. The plan was to release millions of these tiny, toxic plumes into the wind, letting them drift over German towns and cities. The hope was that people would unknowingly inhale the poison. Ultimately, the project was scrapped. It was deemed too unpredictable, and frankly too horrifying to control. But the fact that it was even considered shows just how desperate and wildly creative the search for a winning strategy had become. Not all strange wartime ideas were so terrifying, though. Some were accidental strokes of genius. In Germany, scientists were working around the clock to develop a better synthetic fuel for their aircraft. During one experiment, they created a strange chemical compound that had a peculiar property. It hardened almost instantly and stuck to everything it touched. At the time, it was seen as a complete failure, a useless mess, and the formula was shelved and forgotten. But after the war, Allied researchers stumbled upon the notes from this failed experiment. They saw potential in its bizarre adhesive properties. After a bit of refining, that wartime mistake was transformed into one of the most useful inventions of the modern world: superglue. A chemical blunder born from conflict became a household staple used by millions. Then you have the soldiers whose lives were so incredible they read like fiction. Take John Steele, a British paratrooper. During the war, he disappeared behind enemy lines not once, but twice. On both occasions, he was presumed dead by his unit. His family back home held funerals for him, and both times, months later, John Steele would just show up, alive and well, having survived by hiding with local resistance groups in occupied Europe. When he finally returned home for good in 1945, his family famously joked that he was the only man they knew who had managed to miss both of his own burials. Even in a war defined by its brutality, moments of shared humanity could appear in the most unexpected places. In 1940, a German U-boat captain named Werner Hartenstein torpedoed and sank a British passenger ship, the Laconia. But as his submarine surfaced, he heard the cries of hundreds of survivors, including women and children, freezing to death in the cold Atlantic waters. Instead of sailing away, which was standard protocol, Hartenstein made a choice that put his own life and his crew at risk. He brought his submarine to the surface, pulled as many survivors from the water as he could, and then did something unthinkable. He broadcast a message in plain English to Allied forces, giving his location and asking them to come and rescue the rest. It was a stunning act of compassion, a brief truce in the middle of a brutal war, where enemies chose to see each other as human beings. Decades after the war ended, another bizarre story came to light, this time in a dusty English junk shop. A man browsing for antiques bought an old typewriter-like machine for just a few dollars. thinking it was a quirky piece of office equipment. He had no idea what he had found. Years later, when historians got a look at it, they were stunned. It was an extremely rare Nazi encryption device, even more complex than the famous Enigma machine, used for top-secret communications. Only a handful were ever made. Its accidental rediscovery was like finding a historical needle in a haystack, and it helped cryptographers decode forgotten messages, adding a new, fascinating chapter to the history of wartime intelligence. Speaking of intelligence, the victory against the Nazi codes is often credited to Alan Turing and his brilliant team at Bletchley Park, but their success stood on the shoulders of a hero most people have never heard of, a Polish mathematician named Marian Rejewski. Years before Britain even entered the war, Rejewski and his colleagues in Poland had already achieved the impossible. They had cracked an early version of the Enigma code. When the threat of invasion became imminent, Poland secretly shared all of their groundbreaking work with the British. This gave the Allied codebreakers a monumental head start. Without Rejewski's early genius, cracking the final, more complex Enigma codes might have taken years longer, potentially changing the outcome of the entire war. The war also gave birth to some ideas so outlandish they almost defy belief. In the United States, military engineers developed a top-secret weapon known as the Bat Bomb. And yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. The plan was to strap tiny, timed incendiary devices to thousands of bats. These bats would then be dropped over Japanese cities at dawn. As the sun came up, the bats would naturally seek dark places to roost, flying into the attics and eaves of Japan's highly flammable wooden buildings. When the timers went off, they would start thousands of fires simultaneously, causing citywide chaos. In test runs, the plan actually worked surprisingly well. The project was eventually cancelled only because the atomic bomb became the priority, but it remains one of the wildest and strangest real-life weapon concepts ever devised. Yet, amidst all the bizarre inventions and incredible survival stories, some of the most powerful moments came not from military strategy, but from pure moral courage. In Lithuania, a Japanese diplomat named Chiyun Sugihara was stationed as the Nazis began their sweep across Europe. Jewish families, desperate to flee, swarmed his consulate, begging for visas to Japan. Defying direct orders from his own government in Tokyo, Sugihara began handwriting transit visas, day and night, for thousands of refugees. When he was finally forced to leave his post, he didn't stop. He wrote visas on the train platform and even threw them from the window of his departing train to the desperate crowds below. He single-handedly saved over 6,000 lives. His bravery wasn't on a battlefield. It was in an office, with a pen and a stamp. World War II is often remembered as a story of armies, battles, and destruction. But when you look closer, you see it for what it truly was, a collection of millions of individual stories. It was a conflict shaped by scientists making accidental discoveries, soldiers who defied death, commanders who chose mercy over orders, and ordinary people who found extraordinary courage. These stories remind us that history isn't just about the grand events we read in textbooks. It's about the unpredictable, the unbelievable, and the profoundly human moments that lie hidden just beneath the surface. Thanks for watching. If you found these stories as fascinating as I did, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more hidden histories. See you next time.